All right. Good day. My name is Deon Winchester. I am with the Black Faculty and Staff Research Project, and I am with Jeanette Glover from UF Career Services. How are you doing today, Jeanette?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today, Deon?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Jumping right in, can you tell us about where you were born and where did you grow up?
So I was born in Mulberry, Florida. And so Mulberry is a small town with 3,000 people in Central Florida in Polk County. Our claim to fame is phosphate. So 3,000 people, the city hall, the library, the police station are all in the same building. So my humble beginnings and majority of my family still lives there.
Mulberry, I've seen that. I've passed through that town a few times, I think, on my way south, US 19.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So State Road 60, and it's right in the middle, of state, you know, if you're going between Tampa and Orlando or any of those things. So you might have passed through it and you didn't even know that you were there.
If you drive too fast, you might miss it.
You'd miss it. All 5 stoplights, you miss it.
So could you share some from your experience from your formative years, any experience that made you felt a sense of inclusiveness and belonging?
Any experience that made me feel a sense of inclusiveness or belonging? Outside of my family, I always felt included and a sense of belonging in education. So being able to go to school, do well in school, being able to be recognized for just interest and natural interest and desire to learn, to inquire, to ask questions, and that being encouraged and supported from not only my family, but being surrounded by other educators who saw that in me and encouraged that to continue to happen. So I would say that. And I think at the University of Florida, I was a student at UF, and I think points and times where whether it was community that brought others together for a football game or some other type of event to rally around others, gave me that sense of belonging.
You've been at UF for a while now. Yes. How long have you been at UF?
So I have been an employee at the University of Florida for over 15 years, so almost 16 years.
Wow. So could you tell me, growing up in Mulberry, what was that like? You talked about the importance of education. What were the schools like coming up in the schools? Were they diverse? Were they integrated? And who were some of the folks that really impressed upon you that sense of education?
Yeah, so Mulberry is a small town, but it's adjacent to a larger city, if you will, in Polk County called Lakeland, Florida. And I'll say the schools were not as great in Mulberry, just thinking about the size of the town, the people, and the industry that was in the area. So I went to schools in Mulberry briefly in elementary schools and elementary school. And then my grandmother really instilled a sense of education and growth into me, but also the children and grandchildren. I say one of the things that I appreciated about my family was that college was not something that we all had to do, but you had to do something. So you may not go to university, but you needed to pick up a trade, you needed to learn a skill, you needed to get a job that was going to move you forward. and there were multiple ways to do that. So the options were shared, but you had to do something. And for me, because education was something that I was drawn to, and I had just interest in learning, and at an early age was able to excel in it. It was something that I knew that I wanted to continue to do. So my grandmother, who worked in Lakeland, she sought out and encouraged my mother to help to seek out schools that were in the Lakeland area that would allow me to grow in learning. And so being able to be in gifted programs and being able to be supported in that way were things that were important to her that I got. And we filed the paperwork that was needed so that I could transfer to a school outside of the Mulberry area. And my grandmother, who was a surgical tech at the hospital, would adjust her work schedule to make it so that I could go with her in the morning and be dropped off, whether it was really early in the morning before school started, or with someone who worked with her that we knew, so that I could get to school. And then from there, she would be able to pick me up, and that we would drive 30 to 40 minutes back home each day. So yeah, my grandmother, I have to give all of that recognition and support to my grandmother, encouraging it. And then along the way, because my grandmother did not go to university, so it was through other educators. So teachers that I found who saw the gifts and talents that God had put in me, and who saw that I was trying to find my way, and who also encouraged me and shared resources and information to help me to figure out what to do and how to do it.
Any teacher really stands out from,
Yeah, there was, I think there's a few. One particular who I'm still in contact with today, her name was Miss Pam Sadzina, who was my gifted teacher. And I am grateful to her, and I've said this to her several times, for seeing the gifts in students who look like me, and who encouraged those gifts to be shown in different ways, and for students like me to embrace that. So I remember going to, it was a class that we had to be bused to like once a week. I remember going to the class, and that first week I was the only Black student or Black female student. And just trying to figure out like where was I going and what was I doing and all of those pieces, and having someone who just to your question before, created a place to make sure that students like me felt like we belonged. And even though we had not had certain experiences as others in the class, the patience and the ability to ask questions and share and to grow, that was huge. So I am grateful and appreciative to her.
Okay, thanks. Along the way, do you recall an instance where you, or a period of time, or an instance where you became aware of your race,
At some level, I think there was an awareness of just difference, right? Of just being in a family of Black people, and going to school where there's Black and white in Mulberry, and even in the Polk County area, we really just had black, white, and Mexican was the extent of Hispanic. But I do remember the first time being called outside of my name. And that was by, I think it was in the third grade. No, maybe it was fourth grade. Fourth grade. I want to say fourth grade. And we were at the playground, and it was by an Indian boy. And I'm not quite sure what I did to him, but I remember he called me the N-word. And the whole group of us kids who were outside playing all paused and like out of shock because he had said that word and he said it towards me. And I froze. I didn't know what to do, and everybody else didn't know what to do. And then he ran over to me to apologize and to beg me not to tell, because if I told, he'd get in trouble. And I chose not to tell. So that experience was a very vivid experience of knowing that there were differences, and it was beyond just black and white differences. And I think being raised by my grandmother, I was early aware of the differences, just knowing her experiences of growing up, and being her being attuned to people watching or people asking certain questions or doing certain things to us because we were Black. And I always didn't pick up on those cues in the same way. But that experience with that particular student in the fourth grade, I remember that. And I remember that there was a distinct difference, and it was beyond just black and white, that difference was shared.
You know, I wonder what your grandmother, do you recall? I'm sure you've had many conversations on the ride to school with your grandmother. Do you recall any words of wisdom that your grandmother or any family member may have shared regarding the issue?
Yeah, early on, and even still now, reminders of the importance of remembering who you are, and that you not only represent yourself, but you represent your family and a whole community of other Black people, African American, but just even Black people. So being mindful that this is, and that it is not about you. Always, sometimes, none of the time, depending on what was going on, she said, it's not about you. You know, this is not about what you want to do and people being fair to you. So that this is about something that's greater than you. And which was important to keep me to persevere, because I remember that, you know, you needed to push and you need to move on, because it's not always about you, but other people who need you to do this. And that's why she sacrificed and worked 2 jobs and gave so much, because it wasn't always about her to be able to do that. And then I needed to do the same. But to remember that I represented more than just me in these spaces. Also, words of wisdom would be from my paternal grandmother is keep living, right? Because this idea of, and at first I didn't get it, and I thought, she's like, you know, being whatever to me, like, oh, they're a child, you're so young, right? But as I've gotten older, I realize and I take in the wisdom around it, right? Because as we keep living, things change and our perspective changes and our eyes open up, like we see things differently. And, this too shall pass, right? It's kind of like that idea, like you keep living and you'll see this is not as bad as you thought it was, or it could be worse, or gosh, this was actually good. Like, so those are just a few of the words of wisdom that I can think of from my grandmother as it relates to issues with race. Some of it was too about this idea of you have to work harder. So it really, you can be you and you can think that you did your best, but as a person of color, as a Black girl, you are going to have to work harder than your peers. You are going to have to do it darn near perfect, and then some more for people to recognize and acknowledge that. And nothing would be just given to you, So you're going to have to work hard, and you're going to have to put in the work, and you're going to have to do these things. And in the end, hopefully it will pay off. But it's you're going to work hard because you belong there, but you got to show people that you belong there.
Wise words indeed. Could you talk about what high school and transitioning into college? You mentioned one of the things that was important in your family was to attend college. But can you speak about when that time came to attend college? What was that decision? Maybe what options did you have, and where did you go?
Yeah, I mean, so in my family this year, college was optional. So you had to do something, but you really, that was kind of on you to be able to decide on what you wanted to do. And if you wanted to do it, you needed to hustle at it. So my older sister had gone to college, and out of my mom, there's 4 of us. So my older sister had gone to college, and she was but the first of all things, right? So it's the first grandchild, first niece, first daughter, all of that. And there was a lot of energy, of course, to be able to put into her as the first, and then being able to watch her to go. And she went to FAMU, so she went up to Tallahassee, and it was exciting for all of us, and very much so a point of pride to see her go. My grandmother did not go to college, but she was one of 12, and so she had other siblings who went, and that's where they went. So it was a transition, if you will, like you're supposed to go. And that was the only university that I remember hearing about, like you were going to go to FAMU. Like that was where we went, and that's what we did. So my sister, she went to FAMU and wound up coming home because she had gotten pregnant. And that process was hard. It's hard collectively for the family. It's hard for her herself to come home and having a child and trying to figure out like how to process that. Hard for the family because you were the first in the model, and to kind of figure out how that's going to go. And so one of the things that my mother said to me out of love, I know, but she said it and she meant it, was that I have already sent one child to school, and this is what they did. If you want to go, you're on your own. And she meant that. And so if I wanted to go, I was on my own. So I knew that she meant that, and I needed to make sure I made it a point to try to figure out, in my own head, like what I needed to do to not let my family down in this way. And so to be intentional about that. So I made it a point in my high school years to hustle, to go and meet with my guidance counselor to find programs at the university, at the high school, but also to go into, I mean, back then it was you go into the guidance counselor office and they'd have books or binders with like schools and handouts and SAT and ACT and prep things and all of this stuff, right? And I would go in there to try to figure out like what I needed to do to apply for college and to get scholarships, because my mom said if I wanted to go, I was going to be on my own. And I needed to figure out like what that meant and what that would look like to be able to make it happen. So I was on my way to Tallahassee. I remember asking for, I guess maybe it was my junior year. I asked for Christmas a typewriter. I wanted a typewriter so that I could type my college essay up, so I could type it up. And my grandma did. My grandma got me an electric typewriter so I could type my college essays up to apply. And I got my typewriter and I was on my way to Tallahassee. And then a girl that I worked with, she is a Caucasian white female I work with. Her family had tickets to the Gator games and they loved the Gators. And so they had a call it Winnebago, what do you call it? RV. And they would come up to the university to go to Gator games. And I didn't even know where Gainesville was. So talking about, I really hadn't been outside of Mulberry. Yes, Gainesville's between here and Tallahassee, but I just knew about going to Tallahassee. And she invited me to come with her family to a Gator game. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll come. And that was a big ordeal. For one, for her parents to allow her to have somebody to come. For two, for me to go and not had to get like a Gator shirt and all this kind of stuff. But I tell you what, long story short, came to the Gator game. They parked that RV. We walked up North-South Drive, which is now Gail Limeron. And I remember people like chanting, "It's great to be a Florida Gator," and just like the sea of orange and blue. And in my spirit, I knew I was supposed to be here. I just knew it. Just from walking up to the stadium, I said, "You're supposed to be here." I didn't tell anybody else that, but I knew I was supposed to be here. So I applied to one school, which was the University of Florida. And talk about, this is never the advice that you give any student, but nobody gave me advice because I had a 17-year-old brain of trying to figure out how I was going to do this on my own. And I didn't tell anybody. And I had nobody else in my family who had gone to college, to be able to help me. So I applied to one school, which was the University of Florida, because I knew I was supposed to be here. And thank God I got in, because otherwise, I don't know where I would be. And my whole entire family and community and the young white woman or girl who brought me to UF, they were all shocked and surprised that I got in. Which at the time I didn't realize why people were shocked, but later on I got it, right? Because again, some places people would say that you're not supposed to be, where God says that you are supposed to be. So I got in. So I would not advise anybody to apply to one school. And say that, but this is a good example of God having more plans than we did, and it worked out for me. Not to say it won't work out for others, but naive. I didn't know.
Been here ever since.
Yeah, so kinda. Yeah, I've been a Gator ever since. So I did that. This is in the late 90s, did that. And then I left after I graduated because I was like, no more school. You know, you have some friends who are like, I'm going to graduate school. And I was like, I'm done with school. Like, I need a break from school. And even graduating and trying to understand, which I couldn't, Deon, I still struggle with this. What did I do that my sister couldn't and that other cousins and people from home, what they couldn't do? Like, what did I do that was so special? Because I believe that they could all do that, and so many people could do that, which was still a struggle trying to understand, like, why me in this way. But graduated, needed a break, moved to Fort Myers. So moved to Fort Myers to be able to work. And then came back up to Gainesville for a job in fundraising with the American Heart Association. So not even with the university, and did that for a while. And then looked at the university for future employment and as an opportunity to continue my education. And then I've been here ever since. So a couple stops in the way, but back.
Man, you know, Jeanette, could you expound on, you know, that question you asked in terms of what you just said? Why were you able to make it? Right? Could you talk about your experiences being a student in the 90s? And, you know, 80s, 90s, thousands, you know, every decade, you know, some things are different, some are the same, you know, but I could you share what were the things or people that helped you make it?
Yeah, I will say, you know, this is 90s or early 2000s. My experience coming to University of Florida and being a student, is that it was lonely. I can say that it was lonely, and for many reasons. One, I was coming from a small town of 3,000 people. And I don't know what the numbers of UF were then, but it wasn't 3,000 people. So leaving, I think we're probably in the 20,000 range as an institution, 20 or 30,000. So just leaving my community and the people that I knew, and I had no friends here. So I had nobody to and this was before, you know, cell phones and all of that kind of stuff. So being able to communicate and finding your way. So that made it lonely and a challenge. And what we talk about are students in their first semester being able to build and develop community. That's real. You know, I was planning on going back home because I struggled with being able to meet and find people, and everything being so different. And I tell you, I cried my first 6 weeks of being in Gainesville, and my mom, my aunt, and my grandma, they would all take turns calling me. So somebody would call me in the morning, somebody call me for lunch, and somebody call me dinner time. And we planned it, you know, because I'd have to be in the room to get the phone in the dorm for somebody to call. And then each time I talked to somebody, I would just cry because it's like, I want to go home. And I remember my mother saying, her words of wisdom was like, I'm tired of you crying. Just come home. Like, I'm tired of you crying. You come home and you go to the community college here, and then we'll figure out something again later. Then I remember saying to her, I can't come home and go to the community college. Like, how do I explain that? And then she said, well, stop crying. Like, well, stop crying, because she couldn't take it anymore. So at that point, again, I had to decide, am I going to stop crying, or am I going to, like, you know, suck it up or go home? So then I decided I was going to stop crying because I couldn't. And I remember sharing this with friends, and they're like, how are you going to go home and explain to people that, you know, you couldn't get over being homesick? and not really try to build community and to connect. What helped and what God did was when I was able to find my major, I was able to find two Black women professors who would be mentors and support to me and models to support me on the way. One was Dr. Debbie Gamble. And then the other was Dr. Bertha Cato. And they were both professors in the College of Health and Human Performance and the Department of Recreation, Parks and Tourism. And so seeing those women, one, having two women to be my professors in college was something that I had not had before. So, but then to see two Black women to do it and to do it well in a predominantly white institution and to open their office hours, in their office to me, but then also Dr. Gamble opened her life and personal and her home, and being an extension of my family to me while I was a student and an undergrad, but even as a young adult, and Dr. Cato doing the same at later points during my time in Gainesville were powerful. And so having models and having individuals to be able to help you to support you to navigate this process, because, as a young person, you've never gone through this journey before. And especially a young person who's a first generation college student, you've never seen or experienced this before. And so, you're taking the information that you're hearing from your peers, and sometimes you're trying to make sense of it, or the things that you're making sense of, you're not putting it quite all together in the same way. And so having two people to do that, to help build community and support the community is huge. It's huge. And so those were two models that I am grateful for, because I didn't see a lot of that in my classes. There were very few people of color in my classes here at UF that I remember, at least. And again, when we're going back to that question that you asked me before of trying to process what I did that others couldn't do, I'm still not sure in some ways, besides a level of focus and commitment, which also, for me, I thought it required me to just focus in on my books and not do a whole lot of extracurricular things. So I didn't participate in some of the cultural and student engagement pieces of the university that I think would have probably enriched my experience more, but I didn't, because I really wanted to focus on school and make sure that I didn't get involved in things that would prevent me from graduating, like some other people in my family.
And that is powerful right there, whether it was, you listen to the story of the first Black student who graduated, the late, Judge Mickle, and his story, you echo some of the same sentiments, and he went here, when he graduated, was in the 50s, so to hear that in the 90s still, and to hear that, these two Black faculty members were able to take you and sort of be your extended family that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That's really powerful. You graduated, and you left and you returned as a member of staff.
Yeah.
Indeed. What was that? What's the, no, that's that. What we would call you? Is that a double gator? Are we at the double gator stage? Yeah. But what could you compare, contrast per se your experiences as a student? That first, you remember that freshman year and having matriculated, having graduated, and then coming back as a staff member. First year, could you compare and contrast those two? Were there any similarities or differences?
I would say, as you asked the question, the first thing that came to mind was a point of pride. So to be able to return to my alma mater and to give back to the university as the university gave to me, that was my first thought of having a point of pride. So being able to see, okay, this university allowed me to be here and to get a degree, to change the trajectory of my family. And now I get to come here and do the same for other students, but then also to engage other stakeholders to think about the University of Florida in a different capacity. So it has been and continues to be a point of pride to be able to be a staff member here at the University of Florida and to be able to give back to an institution, but also a community that being a Gator has allowed and afforded me much. I would also say the transition was it was a challenge. It was a challenge and different because, being a student is very different in the Gainesville community to being a working professional. So there are parts of just even if you just talk about the city of Gainesville, I remember early on, there were parts of the city that I just had never gone to as a student, that as a staff member, I learned about. Like I never went to Hale Plantation before as a student. I never went past Newberry Road, like University Avenue. And as a staff member, I remember moving on the northwest side of town and being like, wow, this is where people live. So, they have stores, they have other stuff over here, and everything is not centered around the university in that way. And then building community outside of the university, because having friends and people that I knew who had moved away. So really having to build a new community, but within the same city, but presented its challenges as well as opportunities as a young professional to figure out, along with your professional identity, right? In that way within the Gainesville community, but then also within the university. I can honestly say the Black faculty and staff group existed then, and it became a place of connection. That was truly a great reminder, and I have shared the invites and the announcement out with others to say this is a great place to go. Even if you're not able to go to all of the meetings or sessions, but for you to be able to remember and realize that you're not alone and that there are other folks on this campus who look like you, who are trying to do similar things as you that you can learn from and to build community with. So I know this group has been a resource to me and others over the years. But overall, it's been good.
Indeed. I mean, you've had a positive experience.
Yeah.
Could we drill down to the details? Because, being a woman, being a Black woman, certainly in a traditional, at an institution that you were, I'm sure, presented some challenges. And could you speak to some of the challenges that you may have faced as a not just maybe as a student, or also as a staff, And how did you address some of those challenges that so many of us have faced and continue to face over the years?
Some of the challenges I think about is the lack of representation, right, and exposure. Of others, right? So, I remember being a roommate. And so, the first experience, it was my first experience too of having a white roommate, but it was truly their first experience but I had white friends that I had visited, or I had, stayed over their house or something briefly. But their encounter, so having roommates and folks who had not had a Black friend before, or had not been or worked in projects or worked with Black people nor Black women. And so, again, going back to the advice of my grandmother about saying, like, this is always, like, you represent more than you, right? And having people who may have had one encounter with a Black person or a Black female like myself, and hearing stories about, well, I've always thought Black people did this, but when I met you, I learned that I guess all of them don't do this. So representation and debunking these myths or ideas that people had about, like, one-dimensional Blackness, and not embracing this idea that Blackness travels and transcends so many pieces to identity and experience, and how that shows up and how it looks for me and for you are different. So in that way, and I experienced those same components and sentiments in college, as well as being an employee, where people had not worked with Black women in certain capacities, or they knew of Black people from what they have experienced on TV or they heard from others. And they had ideas about what that would look like and be. And it presents, and at times it's presented challenges, it's presented opportunities as well, but it's presented challenges of folks having an idea about you before you're into the room and space. I know one of the things that still cracks me up today, it happens to me often, is that people, if they talk to me on the phone or we have an interaction, they have a completely different idea of who I am and what I look like than when they meet me. So, and when those encounters happen, people, they'll come out or in a meeting and they'll say, Jeanette or whatever, how they pronounce my name, Janet. And I'll say, it's here. And then, this brown face stands up and they say, oh, I would know that voice anywhere. So, because, people might, my voice sounds different than what people might perceive I look like in that way. But and then even in my role now, and as I've led across the university in different capacities, like, it's, for many, it's the first time that they have had to report to a woman of color. Some people it's a woman, but to have to report to a Black woman. And I have had staff members to say, I expected something different with you. Having one staff member say, oh, our interaction was so pleasant, which to me is like, what did you expect it to be? Besides that, or I've so enjoyed working with you. And then others who say, I expected more because you were a Black woman. And I've had Black staff to say that, like, that I hold you at this highest expectations because of who you are. And then others who expected very minimal. from me and that. And then, having people and mentors and friends, other friends, and leadership to call out some of the challenges that I've had and experienced and say, it's because people really, they struggle because you're Black, right? Or nobody would want Auntie Mama telling them what to do, and some of those pieces are, it's hard to hear at times, but it's also, it's been comforting to have others to see it as well, right? So that, you don't always, you don't go into like the challenge that I'm having, it's because of these things, but, being able to hear and to receive others' perspectives on how might you be able to work within these challenges, and doing it as a woman and a person of color kind of in some ways presents a very interesting opportunity of navigating. And so having the ability to hear from and embrace women, who can tell you, and thank God for our my white women who are allies in this space and who understands what it means to lead as a woman. And they may not have the race piece, but they get those challenges. Are Black men who understands what it means to lead as a person of color. They may not have the gender piece, but they have that piece as well. And then I tell you what, and this is the honest truth, I have been blessed with some great white men who have been allies and gatekeepers and supporters to just embrace me, and to see, again, going back to God putting people in your life who see your talents, gifts, and abilities and your calling, and who are willing to support you in this space. So not even being limited in that, and see my interests and desires, but also see the ability to partner with me and to help me to grow. Those are things that I have benefited from, even in spite of the challenges.
You touched on allyship. Mhm. Could you you touched on allyship and prior mentorship. As a student, you talked about Dr. Gamble, being that mentor, and as a staff, the allies to support you, in your role. Could you speak to the importance of that mentorship and that allyship, in your career, in your path? You talk about the intersection of gender and race. How important is that, and to your, to your career?
It's essential for me. It's essential. I was raised that it takes a village to do anything great, and that you cannot do anything on your own. So it's communal work. And for me, even in spaces where I might be the first, or I might feel like I'm on an island by myself, this idea that I am never alone. I think my faith grounds me in that idea, because for me, like God is always present and he's always there, but he also sends people. And so, you can think that you're alone and you could be like physically alone, but there's opportunity that's available for you to reach out to people. And I have always found people who are willing to be able to help me and support. And so that whole idea of having mentorship and sponsorship and, all of those pieces when you talk about people around you and having a community, I benefited from that. And so I've found people, and if it's not directly related to what I do, I haven't been afraid to reach out to people. I tell you, every year I make it a point and priority to engage with and connect with new folks for professional development. Like this summer, I just went through process of reaching out to VPs and AVCs, so associate vice chancellors, anyone who has career services under their portfolio across the country. And I started with AAU and comparable institutions, and I just sent them an email and asked, could I meet with them? Could I meet with them? Could I learn from them? To understand how they support their leader, their president or their VP in the work that they do. And the conversations have been great. And it's been a range. I mean, I've been blessed and fortunate to have a couple of Black women in the mix of people that I got to talk to. But it's been Black, white, women, men, and people are more than willing to share their experiences about what's happening in their state of their institution, but also to give me a different perspective in the work that I'm doing, but also possibility and opportunity. So I see it as a personal as well as a professional development goal. And I always encourage my team to do the same thing because, the number one way that we, find our next pursuit of interest, whether it's career or not, is through connecting with people, and it could be from a conversation that has nothing to do with work engagement, but that people instill wisdom in you. And it's not, we get to a point where it's no longer about like age or, other things that kind of limit us because we can learn from so many. I have past students who have worked with me that I've been able to be their manager and mentor while they've been in college, and they're still teaching me. Some of the social media and like how you do certain things, but like what's relevant and what's not. So really being able to find opportunities to keep mentorship alive and beyond the professional setting has been key. So I will say it's essential. It's something that I live by, that I have friends and people that have extended the friendship longer. So I call it their family, who have become mentors to me ongoing.
In listening to you, I think of, I think there's this minority mentors program, and I think of how important that is in listening to your story of you being here your freshman year and the experiences you felt, and how important that mentorship is. And I'm glad to see, we have not only you continuing with your mentorship, but that we have programs like that to assist, young students, minorities coming in. Indeed, I have watched you rise, in my time, from a distance. And in your current capacity as Director at Career Services, could you talk about the occupational disparity that affects faculty of color today, you know. And, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to just, you know, again, this is faculty and staff. But what insight do you have in terms of how do we respond or address that disparity so that we can get more Jeanettes on, you know, on campus?
Yeah, well, it is true that we need more Jeanettes and more Deons and more Daniels and more Patrice Grahams and more. We could go on the list of people that we need more of, but this idea of people that look like us, right? Because representation matters. You know, I think it matters. It matters for our students to see at UF when they apply to the university, to be able to see themselves. You know, in my work, we talk to companies about this all the time, that it matters in the collateral material that you use and the people that you bring to campus to represent your companies. It matters what they wear, but it also matters who they are, and to consider, if you say that diversity and being inclusive is important to your company, then make sure what you're putting out to represent your organization highlights and showcases those values that you say are important. So representation does matter, and it matters here at the university for people to see faculty and staff that look like them, and not just across the whole organization, right? Like not just in one type of position or sector, but in other pieces as well. And to be able to do that, I think how you do that is a continuous effort. Like it's a constant effort and a commitment to engage in that way. So it's not a one-time deal, right? So it's this idea that, you know, you hire folks, right? You hire trained and smart and capable individuals, but you also invest in them, right? And so I will, and for me at the university, one of the things that I'm grateful to Dr. Wayne Wallace, who was the director who hired me, who had a focus and an intention for his department on investing in professional development for all. So it just wasn't me, but he invested in professional development and all. And then he had an expectation for all to be able to contribute back to the profession, but also back to the university. So some of those traits in leadership as well as in a unit matters. So people can see the university investing and having accrediting to supervisors and other leaders, where I personally took advantage of leadership development, and every leadership development course or program UF has had, I have participated in that, and saw it as an opportunity to meet new people, but also to learn and to grow, because you can't do this alone, and you can't lead at certain levels at the institution without relationship and commitment and engagement at those areas, and being able to learn from others in that way. So it's commitment. It's an ongoing process to model your values that the university will continue to need to show, but also leaders in units and departments and divisions and areas will continue to need to showcase their commitment to this, right? And it goes in all aspects. It's hiring, it's making sure the questions that you ask when you hire people, and the criteria and rubrics that you use, that they're inclusive in that way, and that you challenge people when they draw conclusions about people not fitting within the organization and what that really means, right? And that you're open to transferable skills, but also backgrounds and experiences and degrees, and that we just don't hire people who've gone to a certain level of schooling, right? Always at all times, but we look at those pieces knowing that the diversity that that individual brings could be good for the organization, could be good for us to think outside of the ways that we traditionally have done things. And that will let new insight, new perspective in. That's how you model it. It's not just one thing that you do, but it's the consistency of it, because some of the roadblocks and barriers prevent people from being included. I'm on for my national association, and I'm on the sourcing and nominating committee where we are charged with selecting new leadership into the organization. And it's subtle things, right? And conversations where, you have an applicant and you look and people will say, well, they haven't done this for years and years and years. But remembering that some of these folks didn't have access to participate in years and years and years. So they're not going to have the depth on a resume or experience to show you that commitment, because they weren't allowed into those spaces to do that. So just being able to question and cause question to those who are in sit in the seats to make decisions, to think about how we could expand the boundaries or the parameters of selecting people to be a part of our community.
As we wrap up, final couple of questions. In the beginning, you talked about some of the wisdom you got from your family is to live, and in living, your perspectives or your consciousness grows and changes. Could you share any perspective or any insight, and how has your perspective, how have you changed over the years as you have lived, as part of this community?
Well, I would like to say and think that I have changed for the better. So I have grown both personally and professionally here because of the university community. I think, again, a point of pride of just being a part of the Gator Nation, where UF, being a graduate from the University of Florida and being a first generation graduate, that has changed the trajectory for my family and for others around me to see what is possible. We didn't see that before. And I am blessed and fortunate that I have a nephew who's the first in his generation to be a Gator as well, and how important and valuable that is for me to see that legacy in my family to continue. And then his sister, just entering the university, she's at our rival school at Florida State, but as a freshman, but also knowing that that is the best school for her in this season in her life. But the idea that she is, and they are continuing their education, and they understood that college wasn't an option. They just thought it was the next thing for them to do, which even the mindset change of them, and of them also to share that with me, was powerful because they've always been in Gainesville and on a college campus. So that's not something that's foreign to them. So I have over the years, I think I've evolved, right? As a person and as a leader, I've been able to see and have a greater appreciation of the wisdom that my grandmothers have shared with me. And as I shared at the beginning, what it truly means to, when someone says, keep living. And it's not about you're young and you don't get it. It's about if you're blessed to live on and see the world change and situations not stay the same, you'll see what I'm talking about, and your insights and perspectives will be heightened, and you may change your mind on how you might have saw and perceived something before. And that's something that I am grateful for. Like I'm grateful to be a part of the University of Florida community. I'm grateful to work here and to be able to represent not only myself and my family in the Gator Nation, but also what it means to be a Black faculty and staff member here. So, and I think, and I know from the interactions that I've had with staff members, even like yourself, each of those interactions have changed me and allowed me to learn something new about the institution that we do and that I did not know that we did here at UF, or a department or a job or a role. As we have more people of color in spaces doing great work and their ability to share and to showcase that, then I get to say, and others get to say, that I know somebody who looks like me, who does that work in a particular area. And again, it speaks to how Blackness travels and transcends what we believe that others could hold in roles and positions across the institution. And I think it makes the university a better place, but it makes our world and our community a better place too.
That final question, as we live on, as we have lived, we live in a world where we know for a lot of Black men and women in the community, they unfortunately, they don't get to live, just to put it that way. We look at what happened with George Floyd and so many others, who not only lost their lives, but some wrongly incarcerated. I read so many stories of men being released from prison who were innocent, and they've been in prison for, they did not get to live their full lives. What are your thoughts on, like the Black Lives Matter movement, and, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think I'm grateful for how technology and different aspects of society have allowed some of these experiences to be broadcast and shared. So I think of the Albury case, where through, and even George Floyd, like people having cameras, right? And so this idea of the videotaping, that people can watch and see exactly what has happened and what has happened in the past, but it became a hearsay moment. But now we have a tape or recording of it, to be able to share with others, that I think validates and allows it allows for it to be broadcasted, and it allows for it to be humanized, right? And to remove some of those the say barriers that prevented people from seeing just the harsh what's been going on, right? Like it's just open up, it's created an opportunity for that, right? I mean, they with the George Floyd, the example of, you know, of him calling out to his mother, like anybody, you know, anybody could understand what that means and what was really happening. So, you know, I'm grateful for technology and advancements in our society that has allowed certain circumstances, although it's unfortunate, but it's allowed people to see that change needs to happen and needs to come. And I think with movements such as Black Lives Matter, this idea of helping others to understand that right now we're in a critical point where we need to focus on our community and our country. And if we don't focus in on lives that matter, and all lives matter, right? But this idea of I think somebody gave an example of talking about if you were at a breast cancer walk, you wouldn't stop and say all cancer matters, because nobody's saying all cancer is not important. But right now we're at breast cancer walk and we're focused in on breast cancer. Because that's the movement that we're trying to move forward with, and I hope that people will continue to see. You know, right now that's where we need to focus in, because we know through all movements, previous movements that our country has experienced to show for civil rights and others, that as we support one community, all rise at the same time. And that's what needs to happen. So, you know, I'm looking forward to and excited about the new Chief Diversity Officer that we have coming at the institution. I'm looking forward to and excited about initiatives that the university has to make sure that even as we continue to rise beyond top 5, that we want to make sure that we don't lose aspects of diversity and inclusion in our student population, as well as our faculty and staff community, and recognizing that could happen. So, and I think that's the first step. I think, you know, the first step is awareness, right? That we have systems and structures in place that may prevent us from being as diverse and inclusive as we could be. And to first be aware of it. 2, we call attention to it and start to have the conversation about how to fix it. And even with a fix, it's not perfect, right? But the fact that there is a commitment to be aware of it, to have the conversation about it, and to bring people together to fix it, for me, that is powerful, and it's moving in the right direction.
Indeed. You know, Jeanette, thank you for sitting and having this conversation with me. But more so, thank you for your leadership. You know, you are definitely a true leader. You know, true and true. But more so, you know, many can look to your path that you have traveled and find inspiration and find strength. And I hope that the words that you have shared here and as we share it with others, I hope that it continues to shine a light, not only as to the path that they can travel to as well, but how do we go forward from here too as well? So thank you, Jeanette. Any parting words?
No, thank you, Deon. That was so nice. Thank you. Thank you so much. If you've heard, I'm very proud to be a Florida Gator. The University of Florida is not perfect, but it is a community that I love and that I am committed to being here to be able to support our students, our faculty and staff, and working to use my life as a living example of how we can cause change and to make it better. So I am blessed and grateful to be here and to be a part of our community as a member of the Black faculty and staff, and just grateful that you all reached out to me to hear my story and to share and to go from there. So thank you for the opportunity to meet with you and to share.